It is very difficult to convey your experience, skills, and how you can contribute to the company in a limited amount of time. You are not a native Japanese speaker. It is difficult for even a Japanese to appeal in an interview. In this video, we will show you how you can appeal and pass the interview even if you are at the N3 level or lower. You don't need to have N1 level of Japanese language ability. You can pass the interview by speaking in a way that Japanese people often use in business situations. This is because speaking Japanese well is a means to an end. The goal is to communicate. In an interview, you have to communicate. If you cannot convey your experience and skills to the other person, it is meaningless even if you have N1. The purpose is to communicate, but for many people, the purpose is to speak Japanese well. Please be careful that the means and the purpose are not reversed. I'll say it again because it is important. What you need is not N1 level Japanese language skills, but the ability to convey how you can contribute your past experience to the new company. If you can learn how to communicate in a way that Japanese people often use in business situations, your chance of getting a job offer will increase. In fact, even those who had N1 failed the interview because their way of communicating was unfamiliar to Japanese and difficult for Japanese to understand. However, even those with N4 level passed the interview if they mastered the way to communicate. Is your way of communicating unfamiliar to Japanese? And is it not often used in business situations? If you use the way we Japanese often use to communicate, your message will be understood better by others. I'll teach you a way of speaking that is familiar to the Japanese and we Japanese often use in business situations. This way of speaking is very easy for the Japanese to understand. Let's use the example of why did you apply for this position? Let's talk in this order. Conclusion, reason, conclusion again. Number 1. Shortly state the conclusion. Being by explaining why you want to work for the company. Be careful not to make it too long. For example, 私のこれまでの経験が御社の A プロジェクトに即戦力として貢献できるからです。The shorter the sentence, the easier it is for the listeners to understand. The subject should be the company, not yourself. Instead of telling them that you want to be involved in Project A, tell them that you can contribute to the company because you can make use of your past experience in Project A and what benefits they will receive if they hire you. Number 2. Give reasons. Give a short explanation of why. It is even better if you also include your appeal points. For example,
今の会社で担当しているプロジェクトは A プロジェクトと似ており、御社で必要なスキルや経験はすでに持っているからです。前職ではマネージャーとして部下を束ねていました。A プロジェクトではサブマネージャーとしてマネージャーの補佐ができればと考えております。
Number 3. Shortly state the conclusion again. repeat the conclusion. For example,
私のこれまでの経験が即戦力として活かせると思い、御社を志望いたしました。
here is the advice. Don't give too much information for one question. Communicating in an interview is like playing catch. You receive one ball from the interviewer. How many balls do you throw back? If you throw too many balls, the interviewer will not be able to catch them. In other words, even if you give a lot of information, the interviewer will not be able to understand it, and eventually will not know what you are trying to say. This is where the miscommunication occurs, and you will be rejected due to your Japanese language ability. Next, I'll give you a bad example. In fact, this is how most foreigners talk about communicating. Answers that are not answers, and a lot of useless information. Number 1. Answers that do not answer the question.
母国ではデザインエンジニアとして働いてきました。日本でもデザインエンジニアとして働いています。私には5年以上の経験があります。
The company is asking why, but it is not good answer. Number 2. Unnecessary information. For example,
私はこれまで様々な経験をしてきました。また、今の会社では私のサービスでお客様にとても喜ばれ、会社から賞を受賞しました。
The company have no idea what you are trying to say. What I often find when I talk with foreigners is that although their Japanese is very good, I don't understand what they are trying to say. The reason for this is not your Japanese language ability. It is simply that we Japanese are not accustomed to your way of communicating. In Japanese business, it is normal to start with a conclusion. If you talk long, people will ask you, "What is your conclusion? What do you want to say in the end?" If you don't start with the conclusion, even Japanese speakers will not get the message. In other words, just by changing the way you communicate, you can get through to the other person. This is because that way of speaking is very easy for Japanese people to understand. Just by changing the way you speak, you can increase your chance of getting a job offer, so please use this method.